When did you realize? My dad's just a boy. I slipped something strange in my dad's mouth and it made him smile for the first time in years. I have had a weird fixation with teeth ever since I lost my first tooth. My dad told me that if I left my tooth under my pillow, the tooth fairy would give me a dollar bill. But I just never really cared. I ended up keeping my tooth in a little necklace they give you to hold it in when you lose it at school. I walked around with my tooth around my neck for what must have been a month before my dad took it away from me when I was sleeping. For years my dad thought I needed to be exorcised because of my fascination with my own teeth. He used to joke saying these were the kind of weird fixations that Jeff Dahmer would have as a kid. But I think my fixation with teeth must come from my dad's weird hatred for dentists. He hated dentists because he was convinced they just had oral kinks and enjoyed making people scream and waste their money for vanity. As a form of protest, he has refused to go to the dentist at all, which as you can imagine completely tarnished his teeth. So when I told him I needed his help to pay for dental school, he was extremely disappointed. I tried to convince him about how good a dentist would be for him, especially for the holes in his teeth. Every time I see him open his mouth, I see huge black spots throughout any visible teeth, and it triggers my trypophobia. Don't even let me get started on the amount of times I'd see him pop Advils like candy because his mouth made him want to Kurt Cobain himself. But for my entire time in dental school, he was convinced he was paying to turn me into a scam artist. So when I came home from dental school with a graduation ticket with his name on it, he nearly threw it out. I almost kicked myself out after that one, but I asked him why he didn't want to come in case I could convince him to let me with my lawyer attitude. I guilt-tripped him for about 2 hours straight, because I'm his only child, and I would spoil him with my scammer money, but he pointed at his teeth and said that I just wanted to make people like him in pain. He then grabbed a handful of melatonin and passed out. I sat there and thought about how this would be the only graduation he missed out on, and I didn't know how to get him on board. He was in constant pain, and his frown line was starting to ingrain itself onto his face. I desperately wanted him to be better. He looked miserable all of the time, and I didn't even think watching space documentaries could cheer him up. But for a solid minute, I saw his face light up when he spoke about a woman he saw at the bus stop. He would tell me stories about how she looked every morning, and called him asking if they could go to dinner. And I was entirely expecting him to branch out and say yes for once, but instead I heard him say sorry and instantly knew it was bad. He gave some phony excuse on why he couldn't go on a date with her, but I knew the real reason. He'd have to show his teeth off in front of her to chew his food and smile, and he didn't even like stepping out in public without a mask to cover it up. I felt miserable for him. He looked like a shut-in every single day. He went to work, ate at home, writhed in pain for hours, go to bed, and repeat. I desperately needed him to take my advice, and he'd never believe a dentist. So I did what any natural nerd would do, study. I tried to look up some studies and came across two that would change my life. One study was on hydroxyapatite, which the study said was an ingredient that makes your enamel stronger, because apparently it makes your teeth suit up and be able to fight against supergirls that'll make cavities and holes in your teeth. The other study was on xylitol and it said it helps get rid of a bacteria called Streptococcus mutans that cause cavities and decay. The step mutans digest the food we eat and it releases acid back into our mouth. However, if there's too much acid in our mouths, it lowers the pH of our mouth to anything less than 7. And once the mouth is at anything lower than 5.5, the enamel starts to weaken and our teeth become at risk of tooth decay. Using something with xylitol would help fight off tooth decay because the bacteria would try to eat it, thinking it's sugar, but instead of releasing acid into your mouth, it dies due to the fact that bacteria can't digest xylitol. My brain lit up while reading it, and I decided I knew how to prove to my father that I don't just scam people for a living. I searched for hours online that night and managed to find the perfect thing I could get with hydroxyapatite and xylitol, and something clicked in my brain. If I just swap our toothpaste with one with hydroxyapatite and xylitol in it, my father won't really notice. So I bought this one called ORL toothpaste. I replaced it with the one in our bathroom, and when my dad noticed the change, he immediately asked me about it. I simply told him that I saw it was on sale and decided to buy it. He stared at me weird for a few seconds, until he nodded his head in approval and started using it. When I saw him use it for the first time, it took everything in me not to start laughing like an evil mastermind. The change was noticeable immediately. His teeth started appearing whiter than usual, which was a huge difference from the yellow gunk look it had before. He started gradually taking less Advils, to the point where I was finally able to take some as well when I had headaches from researching too long. And from the look of his teeth after 4 weeks, I couldn't see huge black holes while he was scarfing down chicken feet. I could tell my father had a new pep in his step, so I decided to approach the idea of going to my graduation again. He rolled his eyes but agreed to come because he already paid for it. The day of my graduation, he actually agreed to take pictures with me, which he had previously avoided. Like the plague, and even better, he smiled at them. It had been 12 years since I saw his toothy smile, but now that I did, I was obsessed with seeing it again. So when we got home that night, I told him to text that girl again. I saw him look at me like I was crazy, but I told him to just smile a bit at her, and everything would change. I saw his eyes light up a bit from that and he went off to sleep so he could do just that the next day. I never saw him so happy when he came home the next day, ranting about how the girl agreed and that they were going to get the 2 for $32 at Applebee's together. And then he went quiet for a moment, so I asked him what was wrong. He mumbled an apology for hating my career, and then asked if I could give him some advice on how to keep his teeth clean. I nearly dropped my croissant at that comment, and went on a long nerdy rant about the use of floss and how to properly get in there. I honestly thought it was the perfect time to slide in the truth, so I told him to use ORL toothpaste as well. He looked at me weird and said, "Wasn't that the brand we have now?" I nodded slowly and he sat there putting the pieces in his mind together, and when he did, he looked at me for 5 minutes straight. Then he gave me a huge hug, and stopped to ask me how to fix his brushing technique because he keeps accidentally gagging.